أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتحدون، الذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا والشفيع ذنوبنا، سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد. وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين، صاحب العصر والزمان، خليفة الرحمن، إمام الإنس والجان، ولعن الله أعداءهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله وقوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين قالوا ربنا الله ثم استقاموا تتنزل عليهم الملائكة ألا تخافوا ولا تحزنوا وأبشروا بالجنة التي كنتم توعدون. صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد. Imam Hussain, the embodiment of resistance, has been our ongoing topic. Tonight is lecture number 8. And as we are moving towards the day of Ashura, these next few nights become critical and crucial in the message that we wish to deliver. We've been talking about the concept of resistance, and yesterday we began a subtopic of those entities and concepts that sometimes block our progress on this path of resistance. When we understand the importance of resistance and the need for it, why are we still not resisting as individuals and as communities? And yesterday we talked about the blockage of doubts, of shak. And then of course by looking at the power of doubts, we understood the beauty of yaqeen, of certainty yesterday. And how it is yaqeen that is one of the pillars of resistance, that without having certainty in your mission, then really when you're asked to resist, you won't tread that path. Unless, of course, you believe in that path wholeheartedly. And today we begin a second discussion on the blockages of the power of resistance. And the second discussion that we have today is a lack of courage, fear, vulnerability. That sometimes when we are vulnerable as individuals or as Muslims or as citizens of this country, for example, then we're very easily swayed by whichever force wishes to sway us. And any thought, any discussion on resisting that swaying and being firm in our path becomes an afterthought because we're vulnerable. We don't have that courage to resist. And so tonight we look at a discussion on courage in Islam. What's called shuja'at, to be a shaji in Islam, to be a courageous individual in Islam. And we have a number of traditions and sayings and some practical tips as well, as we always do, to understand this topic. But first, let's define what courage is in Islam. Because sometimes, especially as young individuals, we equate courage to brute strength or to physical victories or the power that your physical strength might have. And Islam doesn't equate courage to anything that is physical in its manner. True courage in Islam, true shuja'at in Islam is defined as the ability to do what the deen of Islam is asking you to do at that moment, even if it means you go against what your nafs wants you to do. It takes a very courageous person to do that. That yes, there are moments where Islam wants me to take on this task, and I equally want to take on this task. And that's ideal. Where the courage comes in is that when I'm at this very infamous now crossroads, where my desire and my nafs says to travel this path, and Islam says, no, right now what's needed from all of you, or from you specifically, is this path. For me now to choose the path that Islam wants and deny my path is courageous in Islam. Countless stories in the plains of Karbala of courage that we can see day in and day out. Individuals who wanted so badly to go and conquer the enemy and bring a cup of water, let's say, for Imam Hussain. When Imam Hussain says, we're not here for that, we're here for something else, they would, of course, swallow the path that they wish to travel on and choose the path of Hussain. And so we need to inject ourselves with a little bit of courage in this day and age especially. It's a very dangerous world out there, and especially all of you who are raising kids in this society and in this world altogether. It's not that simple anymore. I remember back in my time, me growing up in Scarborough, my parents would have absolutely no hesitation letting me go out and play sports all day long, letting me walk to school and walk back. But now it seems that, there's this fear of letting the kids play out on the streets. And if they do, it has to be on the driveway or where they are visible. If the school is a couple of blocks away from the house, they get dropped off and picked up. Not because of the parents, but because society, unfortunately, has taken a little bit of a turn of a dangerous route. So instilling yourself and in your children this sense of courage is very, very important. And when we examine the khutbah of Imam Sajjad alayhi salatu wasalam, I'm going to be asked eventually. I might as well be proactive and ask you now if you don't mind. As was mentioned, today is the 7th of Muharram, and of course, usually a lot of people come in from today. So if I can please ask you all with a little bit of zahmat, I'm really sorry, to fill these gaps up that you see on the carpet, please, with one salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, please. Thank you. Ahsant, may Allah bless each and every single one of you, inshallah. Our fourth Imam in the very famous khutbah that he delivers in the courtyard of Yazid begins by introducing who the Ahlul Bayt are. And he chooses 6 unique qualities to introduce who the Ahlul Bayt are. They, of course, are not limited to 6. He could have chosen any of the other qualities. But we know that his words are filled with wisdom. His choice of words absolutely has some plan behind it. If you look at those 6 different qualities, one of them that he mentions is shuja'at. That if you want to know who the Ahlul Bayt are, you understand us through various calls of ilm and hilm and mahabbat and sakhawat, and one of them he mentions is shuja'at. We the Ahlul Bayt are courageous. And again, as I mentioned yesterday, to understand one concept, sometimes it's easier to understand the detrimental effects of the zid of that concept, the opposite of that concept. So when you are somebody who lives in a constant state of fear, or you're vulnerable, or you're not strong on your path, you don't have the courage to fight and resist those forces that wish you to pull you off the path of humanity, then you are an individual who, like I say, constantly sways back and forth. If your emotional intelligence is not in check, if your identity is not strong, if you don't have yaqeen and certainty on your path, then you are prey to those forces outside that wish to do nothing but pull you towards your own destruction. And unless you're able to have a little bit of courage and fight that urge and block that urge and minimize that urge inside of you, then you'll lose the path of Iman and faith. And we'll look at building this concept of courage, understanding what it takes to be a courageous individual. Because the reality is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran talks about this idea. That sometimes we believe that as we go through our difficulties and hardships, that perhaps Allah is asking too much from me. And again, this all boils down to us knowing ourselves, to us having a grip of our emotions, to us being in tune with our internal kingdom. We know a lot about our physical body, how much we should eat, how much we should weigh, what pill to take when. All that we have down packed, mashallah. We even self-diagnose ourselves sometimes, knowing full well that this pain either requires an Advil or requires a hospital run. That's how much ilm we have of the body. But of the soul sometimes, I don't know if we have that much ilm of the soul or not. We're able to identify that these are holes that need to be plugged in, or these are achievements that I have achieved. He says very famously, لا تكلف نفس إلا وسعها. I have not asked any one of your souls to take on any difficulty past your capacity. And sometimes, and the reality is this, that sometimes we have the toughest time understanding our own capacity more than anybody else does. Sometimes when we go through a very difficult stage in your life, and I can tell you that as many beautiful mu'mineen as there are in this building today, there are that many stories of grief and sadness and tribulations and trials and problems and struggles. It could be individuals as young as these young brothers in front of me, or my respective elders on the chair. Every single one of you at all levels have a story to tell, as they say. Because that's the nature of this dunya. If it's not this hurdle, it's the next hurdle. And sometimes as we're going through that storm, we don't realize our own capacity until when? Until the storm settles and we're left standing to talk about that storm. And the one person that we probably wow the most is ourselves. To think, my God, I can't believe that I got through that, and I'm sitting here telling you about it. Whereas Allah said, look, I would never give you anything beyond your capacity. Your job, however, is what? To take that, go inside of you and find that courage now to get through it. And that's sometimes where we falter. That's sometimes where we pack it up and say, I can't do it. That's sometimes where we make decisions that we know are wrong, but they're easier. Because sometimes to build courage, you have to endure what you don't like. Prophet Jesus, Nabi Isa alayhi salam, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him, a highly respected prophet in our religion, has a beautiful, beautiful statement. It's a mission statement, or should be, for most of our lives. He says, لا تدركون ما تحبون إلا بصبركم على ما تكرهون. Listen very carefully. You will never attain what you love until you endure what you despise. You will never attain what you love until you endure what you despise. And yeah, sometimes this old adage that in order for you to understand success, you have to first experience failure. Failure here doesn't mean for you to be hopeless and to pack things up. Failure breeds what? Endurance. If not this time, then next time. If not this year, then next year. Sometimes, as youth especially, we make decisions that sometimes I found very odd. There are a lot of you out there, mashallah, that are very fully aware of the deen, of the religion, what's right and what's wrong. When I speak to some of you on a one-to-one basis, I'm blown away at how much, mashallah, ilm you have of yourself and of the deen, and how you're able to balance these worlds out in your own world. It's amazing sometimes. And yet sometimes though, when I see that same individual, that same youth, who talks to me on a one-on-one basis, and is a completely different person in a group setting, in a friend setting, in a circle setting, I can literally see this man just joining along with the journey of everybody else, even though he understands what I'm doing is wrong. As you get a little bit older, and you get past, let's say, this age that a lot of you are at, my youth out there, you'll go through various circles of influence in your life. Above and beyond your parents and your siblings in your community, you'll have friends. You'll have boys. You'll have individuals that you actually spend time with. Guys that you go out to dinner with. Guys that you travel with. Guys you watch the game with. Guys that you call and say, look, it's Friday night. I want to get out for a bit. It's been a tough day at work. Let's go out and step out and do something. That's circle of influence. And Islam recognizes that. Islam has pages upon pages of traditions on friendship, on influence, on those individuals that the Holy Prophet says the circle might be many individuals, but they're one soul amongst different bodies. And you become so entrenched in that circle of influence, please, follow me. You get so entrenched that now you dress like them, you talk like them, you eat where they eat, you drink what they drink, you watch what they watch, you go where they go. If one's coming to Masameen, they'll all come to Masameen. If one's not coming to Masameen, they all won't come to Masameen. And you'll carry this circle of influence for a number of years, until something happens, until a spark happens, until an awakening happens. Remember, keep in mind the statement of Nabi Isa. You have to first kind of endure the storm to get to what? The sunshine. Endure the darkness of the night to get to the rising of the sun. Endure a little bit of failure to get to success. So now what do? Now you go through a spark, you go through a little bit of an awakening. Let's say either a tragedy hits your home, God forbid, or you go, let's say, to Hajj, or you go to Karbala, or let's say, for example, a speaker hits your nerve, or let's say, for example, a hadith or an ayat, let's say, for example, wakes you up. And now all of a sudden, now you find yourself in a self-awareness mode, where now you're examining the various dimensions of your life, and you're asking yourself a very difficult question. That this now new and improved me, this spark that I wish to turn into a light of guidance, does my circle of influence support this, or does it hurt this? I know individuals and guys who had their circle of influence in high school. It was the brotherhood, it was, brothers for life, it was everything, They hung out together, they had long hair together, they had the same clothes together, the same shoes together, the same barber, same fade. And then you ask the same guy 10 years after, so what happened to your circle of influence? They said, look, those guys were stuck in high school, I chose to move on. I wanted something else. Or what happened? I went to go see Abba Abdullah in Karbala. I walked from Najaf to Karbala, it changed my life. And sometimes you go through very difficult situations to get to where you have to get to. But sometimes you have to ride that storm. And all Allah is saying, look, you have that capacity inside of you. You just have to believe it and find the courage to discover it, pull it out, and just weather the storm. When you weather the storm, there's a rainbow or sunshine waiting for you on that side of it. So what do now? You approach this circle of influence. And slowly but surely you come to a very difficult realization that my spark, my new path now is not supported by these boys that I have been with for 3 or 4 years. all they want to do, let's say on Friday night, is watch back-to-back movies all night. And I don't mind that once in a while, but sometimes it'd be nice to discuss a few things, talk about a few things. And now that difficult choice is made. And now that's when the courage comes in. Either you are stuck with them, and what you do is you downplay, you minimize that spark, that gift from Allah, and you just go on with your emotions. Knowing full well deep down inside that I'm not enjoying myself here. These guys aren't the same guys that I used to respect and enjoy my time with. These guys are individuals who are stuck in their rut, and I'm trying to move on in a very positive way. Not in a very negative way. There are people at different levels. And tawfiq, inspiration comes at various levels. You never know. So what do you do now? You make this very difficult decision to do what? To separate yourself from that circle of influence. With the knowledge that you're going to be what? Ostracized, isolated, challenged. They'll call you and say, look, what happened, man? You were our boy. We hung out. What's going on? I haven't seen you around in a couple of weeks, in a couple of months. And either you say, yeah, look, my mom's tripping out. She won't let me go out. Or you sit there and say flat out, you know what, guys? I'm not feeling you guys nowadays. I'm trying to figure things out on my own, and right now you guys aren't really into this idea of me right now. So what do? You weather that storm of a difficult decision to get to the point where now you find yourself in a new circle of influence. I've gone through 3 or 4 circles myself. Not in an egotistical way. Maybe they left me, I don't know. But I've gone through 3 or 4 circles myself. And found a circle of influence right now that I enjoy. But I went through a very difficult journey. And sometimes we kind of hide a little bit away from difficulty. Because we fear what? We fear the consequence of that. And the consequence is always what? It's always minimal. But the aftermath is always eternal. Weather the storm. Get through it. You made a very good decision, a very tough one. Now go through it. And part of the courage building process is to endure what you despise to attain what you love. It has to be like that. And sometimes this path of courage is a very lonely path. And this is where really what I want to speak to the hearts of my youth tonight. I talked about the fact that tonight, tomorrow, and Friday, these are very critical discussions now. All of you, please follow me. This idea of sometimes, if I do speak out, if I do make my feelings known, if I do tap into my courage, I'm bound, let's say, to be ostracized, to be, like I said, isolated. And then I'm alone. And that's really where now we have to kind of lean on who? On Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to understand that there's never a moment where somebody who believes in Allah's tawheed is alone. There's never a moment. When Allah Himself is saying in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُدَافِعُ عَنَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Allah is the one who defends those who believe in Him. Allah defends those who believe in Him. When you think you have nobody, that safety net is who? Allah is saying, look, I'm right here. I've never left you. If there's distance between you and me, you've taken a break from me. But now that you've made your way back to me, I'm exactly where you left me. I'm here. You knock on my door, I'll answer the door. Even though it's been years since you've called me, I still won't deny your call. Part of the process of building courage is endurance of what you are going through. And a lot of you are going through a lot right now. And a lot of you are quietly suffering in your life. You put on a brave face in front of the community, at home, when you're alone on the musalla. Your halat of your qalb, the state of your heart that is true, Allah knows. Your wife knows. Your kids know. But that courage to face it is necessary. You have to have that shuja'at. Otherwise, what ends up happening is that, like I said, you kill that spark inside to become a better person, and you become vulnerable. And when vulnerability kicks in, then of course identity, emotional intelligence, yaqeen, all that follows that. It leaves the door altogether. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I'm not trying to paint a picture that's easier said than done. It's a very difficult task to do. To choose a path that goes against the norm, to choose a path where my nafs is screaming at me that I want this path, and you deny that and you go down the path that Allah wants. It's not easy at all. Look at the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen. You would equate, sometimes, maybe some people would equate his bravery and his courage to the amount of people that he has killed on the battlefield. Correct? 70 kuffar, Amr ibn Abdul, let's say in Khandak, the door of Khaybar, all that is Ali's courage. And no doubt it is. But one can argue, possibly, the courageous aspect of Imam Ali's life had nothing to do with the Zulfiqar at all. It had to do with 3 Khalifas and their era. If you look at the life of the Holy Prophet, every single one of his wars, except for one, Imam Ali took part in. He was right there. The Zulfiqar was very active. His sword was very active. And he didn't pull out his sword until his own Khilafat, when he had 3 civil wars. And that middle ground of 23, 25, 20 plus years, when 3 individuals were the Khalifa instead of him, then that era where he kept his Zulfiqar inside could be said as the most courageous portion of his life. Why? Because what Islam wanted him to do was be patient, Ali. Put the sword away, Ali. Now's not the time to fight or rise up. And if you pick up Khutbah Shaqiyya, you can read his pain. You can feel his pain. When he says that, if I rise up against the fitna of my time, they'll say Ali is hungry for power. If I'm quiet and patient, they'll say Ali is fearful of death. These aren't words of a man who's in pain. Sitting there for over 2 decades, a bone in my throat, an arrow in my eye, sitting there with that much pain. He says the old died off, the young became old. I sat there and I waited for my God-given rights. That's not painful, it's painful. They drag him out of the house. They martyr his wife and his unborn son. All of that, and yet Ali is what? Patient. Ali is patient. Why? Because that's what Islam wanted him to do at that moment. It can be said that that 23 years was the most courageous time of Ali's life. Because that's what true courage is. To choose what the deen wants over what I want sometimes. It's a very difficult choice. It's a very difficult choice. And it cannot be done unless you have this sense of endurance in your life. And part of that endurance comes from this discussion on patience. Now, patience has been discussed, mashallah, many, many times. I just want to share with you one tradition that I found to be life-changing for me. And when I first read this tradition, I was a little bit taken back from it. And I really want you to focus with me on this tradition. I'll do my best to explain it to the best of my ability. Imam Jafri as-Sadiq, alayhi salatu wasalam, he's sitting around with his companions, and he says, "Inna subbirun." We the Ahlul Bayt are very patient. Subbirun is different from sabr and sabir. Right? You have sajda, you have sajid, you have sajjad. What's called sighe mubaligha. Sajda is prostration, sajid is one who prostrates. Sajjad is one who what? Who prostrates a lot. He doesn't say that we are patient. He says, Inna subbarun. We are very patient. وَشِيعَتُنَا أَصْبَرُ minna. And our Shias are more patient than us. The companions who were sitting around, and maybe if all of us were sitting around, we'd ask the exact same question. They were a little bit confused. They're like, كيف صار شيعتكم أصبر منكم? How is it possible that your Shias are more patient than you? Listen to his response. and try to understand the concept here. He says that نَصْبُرُ عَلَى مَا نَعْلَمُ وَالشِّيعَتُنَا يَصْبُرُونَ عَلَى مَا لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. We are patient, he says, given the fact that we know what will follow our patience. We have the knowledge, we have the ilm, we have the sabr, they go hand in hand. I know that if I'm patient here, what will await for me after the patience? But my Shi'as, يَصْبِرُونَ عَلَى مَا لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. They are patient even though they don't understand what might follow the patience. They don't have knowledge. You're an individual who's ready to get married. You get a little bit older in age. Guys younger than you are getting married. Your younger brother's getting married. There's pressure from the family. You start to worry now all of a sudden. You're asking others, can you please find me a spouse? And finally, you almost find somebody. Families come, discuss. There's Imam Zaman, there's rings, there's everything, the engagement is announced, and you're almost to the point where now you can announce it on Facebook. That's how close you are. And then something happens. Something happens. The one side that breaks off the engagement will never tell you why. They'll tell you what? The istikhara came out bad. And now you're devastated. All jokes aside, you're devastated. You thought, you know what? This is it. This is the beginning of my life now. And now you're devastated. And you're told to be what? To be patient. Even though you have no idea what tomorrow will hold for me, what 6 months will hold for me, what a year will hold for me. You have no idea if maybe in a week, let's say, I might meet somebody else and this might work. Or this might be the last chance I get at getting married ever in my life. You don't know, and yet you are still patient. The hadith that Imam Sadiq is talking about is not a comparison between the patience of the Ahlul Bayt and the patience of his Shi'as. Because some of you might think that, are you saying to me, Syed, that my patience is that higher of Imam Hussain on the day of Ashura? Of course not. That's not what I'm saying to you. That's not what the hadith is saying to you either. It's telling you what? That's such a beautiful concept. It's telling you that the Imam of your time, your leader, your wali, your guide, understands your situation. Can you imagine now? Imagine for a moment that a person of authority in your life, your parents, let's say, for example, you've been having a long stretch of days where you're down, you're depressed, you're a little bit stressed out, you're quiet, you're reserved, you spend most of your time in your room. You give one-word answers. You barely eat. And then there's a knock on your door, and your mom and your father enter your room, sit down beside you, and all they say to you is that, I know that you're going through a lot right now. I'm not sure what it is, but just know that when you are ready, I get it as your father and your mother. I know that at the age of 16 and 17, it's very difficult right now for you to be who you are. They don't come swooping in like Superman and try to solve your problems. They don't come in and try to say, here's 20 bucks, go buy something for yourself. They don't try to sit there and say, or downplay it or downsize it. No, they simply say, you know what? We get it. We understand. And when you're ready, we're right here beside you. And that makes the problem, or whatever you're going through for X amount of days, a little bit more bearable. In marriages sometimes, as husbands, we have the Superman concept, where if my wife comes to me, and for an hour or 2 hours, she complains about, or not complains, she discusses about the idea of what I'm going through, that this is my stress, I've had a horrible day, a horrible week, and she's telling you what the actual problem is, the first thought that us as husbands have, hopefully, is, I want to fix that problem. So if somebody caused my wife pain, I want to call them and say, look, stop causing my wife pain. If anyone's going to cause my wife pain, it's going to be me, not you. Let me do my job. And then she'll say what? She'll say, look, I don't want you to solve my problems. I'm not telling you so you can go out and talk to this person or buy me this or buy me that. I just want you to understand my problems. Please follow me. I just want you to understand what I'm going through. And the fact that I've told you and you've listened and you have, told me that you understood has now made the heaviness a little bit bearable. Imam Sadiq is sitting there with companions. And all he's saying to them is what? I get it. I get how difficult your life is. I know how difficult your hardships are. I know the fact that right now you're going through a lot, and yet the very next day you're beside me in my dars, or you're behind me in salat, or you're walking beside me to the masjid. I get the fact that you could have every opportunity to pack things up and fold it and leave the deen of Islam, but you don't. You're patient, not because you know what's happening, but because patience is a virtue. And you're doing it just because I'm asking you to do it as the Imam. When I understood this tradition, there was this cloud of hope that came upon me. And I ask all of you out there, my youth especially, if you're struggling, going through a lot, when someone like your sixth Imam is telling you, look, we're patient, that's one thing, but we actually identify that our Shias are more patient than us. That just makes it a little bit more bearable, knowing full well that fine, my sixth Imam won't come and save the day, but at least he gets the fact that our path is difficult, is different than his, and more difficult sometimes. And that makes it a little bit more bearable. And that is what we call endurance, and endurance breeds courage. So this is the reason why, of all the greater sins we have after shirk, hopelessness, ma'yusi, na'umidi, is a gunai kabira, is a major sin in Islam. Why? There's no point, there's absolutely no room for someone to be hopeless when they have Allah as their wali, and by extension they have the Ahlul Bayt, who are sitting there telling you that, look, as patient as you think we are, we get the fact that you as our Shias are more patient than us. It's a beautiful tradition. Somebody of higher authority than you is telling you that, look, we get how difficult your life is right now. So every little bit of khair that you do, we're proud of you as your imams. We're proud of you as your parents. And when you break through that difficulty, and now you find yourself once again, back to your old self again at home, your mom will come and she'll hug you. Your dad will come and he'll pat you on the back and say, wait to fight through that problem. Now let's go and grab that ice cream that I promised you before. When the Imam is saying, I get it, I get it, I get it, and after all of that you preserve and your ibadat increases, you don't think you've gained the pleasure of the Imam? Of course you have. Why? You fought through the belly of the beast, the eye of the storm, to get where you wanted to get to. You cannot attain what you love unless you endure what you despise. It's not possible. And in this process, the one entity that has to be the constant there, if the parents don't understand, if the clique doesn't understand, if the boys don't get it, the one entity that is the common denominator has to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya ayyuhan nas antum fuqara'u ila Allah wallahu huwal ghaniyyul hamid. He says, look, you will be constantly in need, and I am somebody who is needless. The needful come to the needless for help. When the Holy Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says very famously, Ya ilahi la takilni illa nafsi tarfata aynin abada. Those of you who believe that right now you're fighting your fight alone, that no one gets me, no one understands me, no one wants to understand me. And sometimes, we have those legitimate feelings. I'm not trying to downplay those feelings. Those are real feelings at 16, 18, 19. And I ask my parents out there, if you have a child like that who right now you feel like is going through a lot, just sit beside that child and kind of export the warmth back onto him and say, look, you know what? You may think I don't get it, but I'm right here beside you. When you're ready, I'm right here. He says, Ya Ilahi, don't leave me at the disposal of myself for a blink of an eye. Don't leave me at the disposal of myself for a blink of an eye. Meaning what? That even in my lowest point, where I think the world is against me, I'm by myself, I know that I have you beside me, Allah. Now, he won't swoop in and find that courage for you, but he won't give you a difficulty beyond your capacity. You got to find the courage. I challenge my youth tonight, every single one of you out there, from up here to all the way back there in the gym. Every single one of you are living a very difficult life right now. You guys are making very difficult decisions. Some of you are asked at this tender age to choose a major in school, to choose a spouse, to choose where to live. All factors that will influence you 10, 15 years from now. At the tender age of 18, 19 years old. It's hard, hard, very difficult. But you got to find the courage to deal with it. And you gotta lean on Allah now and ask Allah. And Allah has promised you, like I said, وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. That for those of you who now become God conscious and God aware, and now all of a sudden now you're worried about God's pleasure, God says the moment you enter that realm now, I will do what? I will present to you a solution. I'll open the door. I'll give you a path out. And I'll give you risk and sustenance from a source that you never even knew existed to begin with. But the step is what? وَمَنْ يَتَّقِ اللَّهِ. You have to take that step. You have to find that courage. You have to know your capacity and know that this is not above me. I'm above this. Get through the eye of the storm to get to the sunshine afterwards. It's hard? Yeah, man, it's hard. It's hard. But Allah's the one who defends the mu'mineen. We're not fearing anybody but Allah. We're not making ourselves vulnerable for any source but the source of Allah. Without this idea of endurance and patience and courage, we can't understand the power of resistance. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Because the reality is that it's easy. It's easy to go along with the norm. It's easy to simply be like somebody else. It's easy to be a reflection of somebody else. It really is easy. And sometimes that's how people like me are. We don't have our own principles or values. We basically are a reflection of the person in front of me. If the person in front of me is pious, I become pious. If the person in front of me is not pious, I don't become pious. A person in front of me is raging angry, I'll show you more anger than you have. If the person is calm and collective, I'm calm and collective. I'm just a reflection of what you are. Islam says no. You're not importing akhlaq, you're exporting akhlaq. You're not simply being a reflection of the person in front of me, you're teaching the person, if you are fire, I have to be water to put out that fire. If you are, let's say, kufr, I have to show you iman. If you're jahl, I'm ilm. If you're shak, I'm yaqeen. And I take that reflection wherever I go, and I show them that this is how you should be. In the process, I build the courage now. In the process, also I do tabligh as well. But it's easy now. If a person gets angry at me, I get angry at them. It's very easy. What's difficult is to walk away. What's difficult is to swallow your pride. What's difficult is when a person comes and insults your family, you in turn offer him your house to stay at. The ultimate level of akhlaq, is that you respond to evil with justice. Very difficult, courageous path of resistance. How many of us have our own reflection that we go around and showing others that this brother, no matter how I am with him, he doesn't change? It's very easy. It requires courage. And there's one man on the day of Ashura who was not only the embodiment of loyalty, he was the embodiment of courage as well. This was a man who was chosen for the day of Ashura. A warrior of a man. At the highest emotion, in his early 30s, some say on the day of Ashura. Abbas would stand in the Maidan of Karbala and the enemies would run away. He's watching the parched lips of his Mawla Hussain. He's hearing al-atash from Sakina as well. And for a moment, you don't think that he wants and he knows that if I'm given a little bit of permission, I can solve all these problems. His path might be that I want to go fight and get water, but the path of Islam says that we're not here for that. And he becomes the embodiment of courage, because courage is not about physical brute strength. Courage is about what? Choosing the path that Islam says this is the time now to choose. If it's time to fly, you fly. If it's time to fight, you fight. If it's time to freeze, you freeze. Even though you might want to do something else. The 21st of the month of Ramadan, when the doctor approaches the home of Amir al-Mu'mineen, checks Imam Ali and says that the poison now has spread to almost every inch of your body. You only have a few moments left in this dunya. If I were you, I would begin the process of nasihat, perhaps, advising your family on what to do after you are gone. He passes on the responsibility of the imamah to our second imam, tells every single individual that you are now, of course, that your wali and your imam is Hassan. Defend him, support him, help him propagate the deen, and so on and so forth. When he was done, in the corner of the room, there was a sound of a young boy crying. Imam Ali is asking who is crying in the corner, and al-Baneen comes forward and says, Mawla, it's Abbas crying. He brings Abbas forward, says, Abbas, why do you cry? He says, Baba, you approached every individual in this room and you placed their hand in the hand of Hassan. You told them to look after Hassan, to protect Hassan, to support Hassan. But you didn't call me forward, Baba. At that moment, Imam Ali calls Imam Hussain forward, grabs the hand of Abul Fazl Abbas and places it in the hand of Imam Hussain. Says, Abbas, everybody is for Hassan, you are for my Hussain. And Mawla, I'll say this to you, there wasn't a moment that he let you down, Mawla. Every step of the way, Abul Fazl Abbas served Imam Hussain. He would say what? That the sons of Muhammad are the eyes, and the sons of Ali are the hands, and the hands are there to protect the eyes. The hands are there to cover the eyes. The hands don't allow the eyes to have any damage done to them. On the day of Ashura, when one by one the shuhada and the ashab are giving their life, there are moments where Abul Fazl approaches Imam Hussain and says, Mawla, I want permission now, I want ijazat. He says, you are the commander of my army. And Abbas would go away. When more companions would give their life, he'd come back again. Abbas, you're the commander of my army. He would go away. When the families began to give their life one by one, there came a final time where Abbas comes to Hussain, says, Mawla, I want ijazat now. He says, Abbas, you're the commander of my army. Abbas doesn't go anywhere. Abbas stays there, says, Mawla, which army am I the commander of now? Every member of this army has given their life. I want to go and also give my life. Imam Hussain still doesn't give him ijazat. Then the sounds of al-atash began to increase from the khayma. Imam Hussain says, take this mushk and go and get some water for the kids of the Khayma. This story of Abul Fazl Abbas has so many lessons to it. But the tragedy of it is so immense sometimes that we lose these lessons of loyalty and courage. And rightfully so. Perhaps his sacrifice was one of the biggest. They say when he entered the Maidan of Karbala, the enemies parted. That's how much fear they had of this man. He was the only individual in the camp of Imam Hussain that got to the banks of Furat. You can imagine now how much he fought the enemies, or how much they were scared of him, where he was now able to go down that slope. Those who have been to Karbala, you know, you go down a little bit of a slope and get to the banks of Furat. Got off his horse, went to fill the mushk of Sakina. He was as thirsty as anybody else was. He was as hot and as parched as anybody else was. And this infamous picture sometimes that artists depict of Mullah Abbas now having this handful of water that we have. Now if he drank that water, nobody would sit there and blame him. Imam Hussain wouldn't blame him. Sakina wouldn't blame him. Ali Asghar wouldn't blame him. Nobody would blame him. But like I said, his loyalty was such that how could he for a moment take a drop of water when his Mullah is thirsty and his Sakina is crying out for water? Abul Fazl Abbas fills the mushk and the water bag of Sakina and makes his way back towards the Khayma. May Allah give you strength and courage. This is not an easy musibah, a very difficult one to recite and one to listen to. Abul Fazl now has one arm on the alam and one riding the horse. The mushk is with him. He enters the Maidan. Individuals realize that we can't fight this man one-on-one. It's impossible. They begin to surround him. They throw arrows at him. They throw rocks at him. They throw spears at him. This was a giant of a man. And then one man out of an ambush of a tree came and severed his right arm. Abul Fazl grabs the other with the left arm. The mushk is still intact. Another mal'oon comes and severs his left arm. The mushk is in his mouth. He realizes, you can cut me to pieces. The mushk has to reach the Khayma. Then until one man announces, if you want to sever the man's hopes, target the mushk of Sakina. One arrow comes flying towards him. One arrow hits his arm. One arrow hits his head. And one arrow hits the mushk of Sakina. Water begins to pour out. Abul Fazl stops his horse, turns it around. I'm not going back to that Khayma without water. Now this man who has no arms begins to fight the best way he can. There are arrows coming his way. There are spears coming his way, until one man comes behind Abul Fazl and knocks him right down his head, from his head through his eyebrows onto the bridge of his nose. Abul Fazl begins to fall from the horse. Allama Majlisi very famously narrates, Allama Majlisi says that when I recited the Masa'ib of Abul Fazl Abbas, Shahzadi Kaunain, Fatima Zahra came in my dream that night and said, Majlisi, you read the Masa'ib of Abbas, you didn't read the Musibah of Abbas. He says, Shahzadi, I did whatever I could, whatever I knew. Tell me, what did I do wrong? She says, no, everything was right. But you should understand that when someone sits there and listens to the Masa'ib of my Abbas, they should also understand his musibah. What was that musibah? She says, Majlisi, when somebody falls from a horse, they use their arms to break their fall. My Abbas's musibah was such that he fell from the horse, but he fell on the arrow in his eye. The arrow now becomes large in his eye. Can you imagine now? This man has no arms, takes the arrow between his knees, clutches the arrow and rips the arrow out of his eyes. And at that moment, Assalamu alayka, Ya Aba Abdullah. Imam Hussain goes running, grabs Abul Fazl, begins to place his head on his lap. Abul Fazl says, Mawla, my mother told me that when I was born, I didn't open my eyes until I was in your lap. I'm leaving this world now, Mola. I have two requests. One request is for me to have one last ziyarat of you. I have an arrow in one eye, I have blood in another. Imam Hussain cleans the blood. Imam Hussain takes out the arrow. Abul Fazl looks at Imam Hussain. Imam Hussain says, tell me what your second request is. He says, Mullah, if it's okay with you, please, just leave my body right here at the banks of Furat. I don't want Sakina to see my body like this. Imam Hussain leaves Abul Fazl at the banks of Furat, picks up his alam, goes back towards the khayma. Bibi Sakina comes running out of the khayma. She sees the alam. She doesn't see the alam there. She runs out to the Maidan. Chacha, your Sakina is not thirsty anymore. Your Sakina is not thirsty anymore. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Matem Hussain.